Okay, great. So just to kick off then, to give you a bit of an overview of Dynamics 365, in terms of its access, it's available across 3 different platforms, either through the web browser, as we're looking at now, compatible with any web browser, so whichever one is your favorite, through Outlook as part of the Outlook app, so you can create, track, and manage leads or opportunities through the sales journey through Outlook, but also through the mobile and tablet app, which towards the end of the session I'll also make sure that you have access to, so that you can be, no matter where you are, on your phone, on your tablet, creating, perhaps managing appointments, tracking opportunities. One of the benefits of the mobile app is that it is available offline. So even if you're en route to the office and you're on the underground and you've got no signal or absolutely no Wi-Fi connection, you can still update your opportunities should you need to. However, predominantly, I would imagine you'll spend most of your time accessing Dynamics through the web browser, which is what we're looking at now. There are a couple of ways with which we can get to the web browser version of Dynamics, either by using the direct URL, which I will highlight in the ribbon at the top here and also share on the chat window, so you can simply click on it, or by navigating to portal.office.com, which takes you to the home of everything to do with Office 365. Once you're at portal.office.com, you have the option to select any of the applications that you have available to you. So whether it be your online mailbox or your calendar or your list of contacts, you can access CRM through here too by simply hitting the Dynamics 365 button, which will take you to the screen that we were looking at previously, which is the home page of Dynamics 365. Quite evidently, if you were to use the direct URL, which I sent in the chat window, it will take you straight to the CRM. Once you're within Dynamics 365 as an application, you'll notice that the bar across the top in RedCloud Red is consistent across all use of Dynamics 365. So just to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the navigation bar, first up in the top left-hand corner, we have what's called the chocolate bar icon, which takes us to all of the applications available to you as part of Office 365. So even if you're working on another machine, it just looks like I've got a question here. Okay, Lewis, bear with me whilst I resend you the link if you're getting an error with the link I just sent. Let's try it again. I don't know if I sent. Can you try clicking on that new link, please? So whilst Lewis is doing that, moving on, the next up we have the RedCloud logo, which is the home icon with Dynamics 365. So again, no matter where you are, if you get lost within Dynamics, perhaps you're in an opportunity or a quote. Oh, brilliant. I'm glad to hear that worked, Lewis. Thanks for letting me know. So if you're in an opportunity or a quote and you're somewhat lost and you want to get back to where you started, simply hit the RedCloud button and it takes you back to your home page or to your dashboard. Next up, we have the start of what's called the navigation shelf. So if I just select where it currently says sales, you'll notice we have key tiles which represent the different departments within the organization. Underneath those tiles, we have the links to the records or the entities that are most relevant to your team or to your department. One thing I would like to highlight is you'll notice that there is some repetition here. For example, there are leads both accessible within sales and within marketing. This doesn't represent a complete list, a different list of leads. It's simply a shortcut to get to the record types that are relevant to you. So for you guys, I would appreciate that 9 times out of 10 you'll be working under the sales top level of navigation. Here you'll see we can access the record types that you'll be working on. Let's take leads just as a quick example. When you first navigate to a list of records, by default, it takes you to your version of the world, i.e., in this instance, my open leads. Just a little note on the concept of ownership. Within Dynamics 365, if you create a record, it is considered yours and will appear on a list of your own records, unless you create a lead and assign it to someone else, or someone else creates a lead and assigns it to you, in which case it will then also be considered yours. If, however, when you navigate to a list of records and you find that that view isn't relevant, perhaps you want to work on a list of all open leads, or indeed a specific view that you can see at the bottom of the view selector here is available, you can move to that view and use the pin in the top left-hand corner to make that your default view whenever navigating to that list. So I'm going to navigate to the RedCloud customer leads in this financial quarter. Once you're within a view, there are a couple of ways with which we can filter down the view that we're looking at. So as an overview, you'll notice that within our view we have multiple columns which represent the information we need to see at a glance. In the bottom left-hand corner we have a summary of how many records are in that view. Across the bottom of the screen we then have the letters of the alphabet to allow us to drill down in on records that perhaps start with that word. Let's take L as an example. So this is now showing me all the leads that start with the letter L. Now this is quite useful just for narrowing it down, but I imagine that you don't necessarily want to target your leads just by what their name is. So you can also select different columns within your view. Let's take region, for example, and I want to look at the Latin America one. So again, I can click on the L and it's going to narrow that down completely. Alternatively, let's just go back to all so we can see our complete list. In any view of any record, you will always have the filter in the top right-hand corner. By selecting the filter, you'll notice a small drop-down arrow appears next to the name of the column of the view, or the column, and you can then filter down more specifically should you wish. So for example, I want to look at all leads that are in the qualified sales lead stage, for example, that are in Vietnam. Because I'm about to go to Vietnam for a meeting and I want to have some conversations with some people that I know might be interested in our offering. So I can filter down by both those columns. So as you can see, that's narrowed it down so much I've only got 2 people I need to speak to, which is great. And at any point I can deselect a filter on the right hand side to take me back to where I first started. Also available within any view, on the right hand side we have the charts bar which will pop out and you can apply charts based on the view that you're looking at. So in this instance this is showing me my leads by rating, but I can switch my chart. Let's say I want to see the source that they're coming from, for example, or indeed when they were created. I can see that some were created in July and also qualified in July and some in August. Now the bonus of using these charts, let's just take the rating chart as a better example, is you can select the portion of these charts, the column or the portion of the pie chart, and the information on the left hand side will down select to show us that. So again, there's those hot leads or indeed the cold leads I might want to work on. Equally, if I just go back to where we started, I can change my view on the left hand side and my chart on the right will also change. So if I'm not interested in this financial quarter and actually I'm more interested in leads this month, narrows that down quite a bit, I can see that actually the success of the leads is far better in leads that we're generating this month over the quarter. So in summary, my view on the left can define my chart on the right, or indeed my chart on the right can change depending on the view on the left. So you've got a lot of flexibility there and you can create your own views and charts, and I'll show you how to do that as we move on towards the end of the session. Moving on, I'm just going to take this lead in the top of this list as an example. Back at our navigation bar in the red bar at the top, you'll notice that the journey we've taken to get to this lead, Carlos, is mapped in the ribbon at the top. We call this the breadcrumbs. A couple of useful features with the breadcrumbs is using the downward pointing arrow next to the record type, you've got access to the records that the recently viewed records for that record type. So here are the leads that I've been working on most recently. Likewise, if I use the drop down next to the name of the actual lead itself, I can see everything that's relating to that lead that isn't on the home page or the front screen of the lead itself. So just bear in mind those small downward pointing arrows in the navigation bar come very much in handy. I'm just going to hit my RedCloud button to get back to where we started. The final few things I want to show you just with regard to the navigation bar at the top are in this area in the top right hand corner. First up we have the global search, which again does what it says on the tin and allows you to look at records across the organisation. So taking a simple search term, let's take the scenario that the phone's rung and it's someone from, I don't know, Banco Credito, but I'm not quite sure how to spell that. So I can use my Banco search term and it's going to not only show me accounts or companies that start with that terminology, but also contacts that work with organisations that start with that, and also leads and indeed opportunities, if indeed there are any. Now I can also, let's say I'm not sure, that still hasn't produced the search term that I'm looking for. I know that the word Banco is included somewhere in that company, but it doesn't necessarily start with the word Banco. I can use my asterisk or my wildcard to look further within that word. And you'll notice that there might be a couple of other scenarios such as BDO, Banco de Oro, where not just that company doesn't just start with the term Banco. So bear that in mind, and in all honesty I would suggest that this global search in the top right hand corner be your first port of call when looking for a record within Dynamics. The phone's rung and you want to make a record of the conversation that you're having, or indeed you just want to double check to see if someone else is working with that client or that opportunity, you can. Moving on, if that company, that account, that contact still doesn't exist, despite having looked for it, you can use the plus signs in the top right hand corner of the column to create that new record. You'll notice it pops up in a small form in the top of the screen, which allows you to not lose where you were working in the background, but indeed capture that data and get back to where you were started by hitting the save button. Alternatively, should you wish, again, no matter where you are within Dynamics, you have the plus sign in the top right hand corner, which is called the Quick Create, which again allows you to quickly create new records or new activities without losing where you were in the background. So this is particularly useful in the scenario that, I don't know, you were flying back from a meeting in Latin America and you want to make a record of some of the business cards of the people that you picked up on your trip. You can do that by quickly generating a new lead, filling in the details, saving that record, and when you save that record as part of the Quick Create, it encourages you to either make a new record or see that lead in its entirety. So a good place to start if you're playing through a bunch of business cards. Finally, we have this small clock icon, which is the recently viewed items, which again does what it says on the tin and allows you to view records that you've recently worked on. The right hand column here is showing those records, and the icon on the left hand side will show you the type of record that it is. Say for example, here's Carlos that we looked at a moment ago as a lead. There's a couple of other leads here, but also some contacts and some accounts, or even indeed some opportunities. And let's say I'm going to be working on this UNDP opportunity quite commonly over the next few weeks. I can hover over that record, pin it, and it will sit at the top of the screen waiting for me to come back whenever I want to quickly navigate back to that opportunity. Likewise, on the left hand side, I have a list of my recently viewed views of records. So let's say I want to go back to those leads that have been created this month. Commonly, again, I can pin that view and I can get back to where I started. So that's the navigation bar, and you'll notice that that doesn't change and you can access that no matter where you're working. Now let's move on to take the sales journey from left to right, if you like, in a standard sales journey. Now, just by means of description, the standard sales journey should start at the point of lead. A lead is very much a flat record, and by flat I mean it might not necessarily have a connection to anything else, or to an organisation, or to a company, another company, or indeed to a contact, but it's just a very much a place to start. Within each lead, a prospect if you like. Let's take Carlos as an example. There are a couple of things that are specific to you that you should bear in mind when capturing this information. So first up, the structure of the lead. In the top right hand corner we have the key fields, so the rating, the status. This is just a simple flag as to whether we think they're hot, warm or cold, or indeed completely new, or whether we've contacted them or not. Then in the top right hand corner we have the owner, so this is whoever has created this lead or whoever is working on it at the moment. Moving on, we then have this green bar that sits across the top of the lead and indeed the opportunity record further down the journey, which allows us to capture information to define which stage this lead is at. Now bear with me, I'm just going to open up a lead that I created as a demonstration so you can see this in a bit more detail. Let's go back to Carlos. Okay, so within this business process bar, you'll notice it's divided up into different stages. When you move between these different stages, the time that this lead was involved in each stage tracks within the central portion of the lead, which we'll come back to in a moment. You'll notice as you flip between these stages, different key questions will be asked, such as, have they had a demo? And at each stage, some of these questions may be required to ensure that you have to answer these questions, or they might be locked. And you'll notice that from the goal shared stage, these stages are locked, and this represents the fact that we have to move this lead on further into an opportunity before we can take it further. But moving on, I'm just going to shrink the business process bar up to focus on the content of the lead itself. So in the top left-hand corner, we have the key information, such as the topic of the lead, a brief description as to perhaps how we've met them and who the organisation is and how we're pitching to them. We then have the name, the first name and last name. You'll notice here that last name is a required field. Job title, obviously, and other key contact information. You'll notice here that mobile phone number and email and job title have this small blue icon, which represents that they are recommended, but they're not required. So obviously the more detail we can capture, the better. We then have our region field, which you'll notice is locked. You don't have to fill in the region field. This will be populated for you automatically by the country, which we'll come to in just a second. We can start to record the source of the lead, where this came from. And you will notice as you change these sources that you're asked different questions, such as if you select reseller, the CRM will ask you which reseller has recommended this lead to you. The source campaign allows you to search for a specific campaign that you're running that you can tag this lead back to. The type of the lead, whether it's a customer or a partner, and indeed the tier that the lead will sit in. And I know you have your own internal definition as to what tier leads will sit in as they're created and they move up that journey. Status, either open or qualified, and obviously this lead hasn't been disqualified or qualified, so it's staying within open. And whether a simple flag to highlight whether a demo has been done or not. Moving on. We then have more details about the company, where the company is located. You will notice that country is a required field, so do make sure that you fill that in. Now if I just remove Mexico from this country, in this instance, forgive me, let's just load Carlos again. Is everyone following me so far? Are there any questions up until this point?
No questions. Just one point, Lucy, for me. There are a couple of us from the marketing team, so I'm not sure how much time we have, but I'd be very interested to see how we do bulk uploads, for example, for leads and opportunities and things. So just a quick ask if we can save a little bit of time for us to understand how that works. That would be brilliant.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that we put that in towards the end of the session. No problem at all.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Let's just finish off with Carlos as a lead. Bear with me, the internet connection seems to be letting me down slightly. Just going to pause this for a second. Guys, I'm just going to mute for a second. Forgive me whilst I just reload this page because it seems to be struggling a moment. I won't be a second. Thank you for your patience. Sorry about that. So moving on, we mentioned that you can change or make sure that you enter in the country because that will automatically populate the region field for you. So all you need to do in the country field is to search for the name of the country and it will automatically populate for you. Moving on, the central panel in the center of the lead record, in my humble opinion, as a salesperson occasionally, is, or even a marketeer for that matter, is one of the most important parts. And as you'll notice, it's made up of 3 different channels. First up, we have the posts. So the posts is very much, as you can see here, which the work that Ricardo has been doing, it's very much made up of automatic posts, as you can see in this instance, when a lead is created or its status changes or its ownership changes, but also one-off posts which describe updates to that lead, bits of gossip or information, any notes that need to be taken in order to get this sale through the process. So I can see here that Carlos made this note just yesterday. Now the bonus of these notes is that not only are they visible both on this central panel of the lead itself, but also on your dashboard, which we'll come back to towards the end of the session. So you can follow each other. So perhaps if you want to follow the colleagues that you work with, or indeed the whole of the organization, and you will be able to see Ricardo's posts on your central panel, particularly useful if you perhaps work out of the office, you're field-based, or you just want to make sure you're keeping up to speed with everything that's going on across the organization. So those posts not only sit here, but also on that dashboard.
Lucy, quick question.
Sure.
Are those posts searchable? So when you search up on top, for example, somebody posted some gossip or internal intel on Acme Bank. If you search Acme Bank, will it show these kinds of posts? Or
good question. I don't believe it does at the moment, but I think that's something I can enable.
Okay. It's just interesting if we start using it as sort of a collaborative thing where people add in input as we grow. It could be interesting to become part of the record for the entity we're speaking about.
Absolutely.
But again, not a big deal, it's just a thought.
Yeah, I suppose in that scenario though, if you were just to globally search for the company and the company was to appear, you would open the company and see the posts within it. I suppose it's not the content of the post itself, as you say.
Yeah, I suppose all of the auto posts, if they're feeding in from an inputted lead, then they probably will under that inputted lead, but they wouldn't if it's a sort of notes user post like marketing people could just, we heard this at an event, so I'd say, I saw such and such at this event. It could be interesting to become part of the search so that the salesperson who's doing research, they can see information about it. But again, no big deal.
Okay, perfect. I'll double check that, but I think that's probably feasible. I'll come back to you on that list. So next up, we then have the activities panel, which is where, as you can see, the automatic time taken to move between each stage within the sales journey is time stamped. So in this instance, obviously this lead is very much within the first stage, within the lead capture stage, so it only has the one flag there. But as well as these stage durations, or the time taken for each of these stages, you have also got the ability to make records of any phone calls that need to be completed. So taking this as an example, when you go as if to add a phone call, obviously you can give it a bit of a description as to what you mentioned, what you discussed. You can say if it's due, so if you're scheduling a call for the future, you can put in your date at this point. And indeed, you can put who the call either was with or is going to be with, because it might be that it's with more than one person. So you can search to find those contacts or those other leads that you're having that conversation with. Equally, you can then describe which direction the call is going in, or indeed just mark a simple flag that you've left a voicemail to try and get hold of them. Let's just cancel out of that for a second. Now let's say out the back of that phone call you then decided, well, okay, yep, they are interested, but perhaps they're currently in negotiations or in a pre-tender stage. You might want to create yourself a task to follow up with that lead at a different stage. And you can describe what it is you want to do with the follow-up, perhaps discuss the next tender steps, and you can then obviously schedule when that task is due. And when it's due, and importantly, you can then, if it's appropriate, assign that task to someone else, because it's makes much more sense for them to follow up on this lead than you. Let's say it might be that you're tasking someone to organise a demo or organising the demo itself. That will now, not only when I save that task, and Lewis, don't worry, I won't save it, but when I save that, it will sit on Lewis's dashboard, waiting for him to mark that as complete, but also it will synchronise to Outlook. So at 7:45 on the 31st of August, Lewis is going to get a reminder to remind him of the fact that someone else has created that task for me. So there's very little opportunity to forget. As well as phone calls and tasks, you can also use Dynamics to generate and send emails and appointments. So I'll just show you this briefly, but I will also show you how we can do exactly the same process from within Outlook. So by going as if to send an email, you'll notice it automatically works out who it's going from and who it's going to. Again, I can add in other people at this stage if I want to by simply searching for their name, assuming they exist as a contact or as a lead within the system. You can copy in, blind copy in, and even write your own subject and email as you would do normally. But importantly, you have also got these 3 icons in the ribbon at the top, with the templates being the most useful, I would say. So you can put together a selection of your own personal templates, or indeed templates that the organization has created, and put them straight into your email. So let's take this one, this lead template that we have. You'll notice it brings in merge fields such as the name of the contact and indeed the company that he works for, if indeed we know the company that he works for. We can still go in and edit this email if we want to, or indeed put in any account management type wording that we'd like to before we send it. But when we're happy, we've then got 2 options. We can either send it automatically or send it straight away, which takes a copy of this email and pushes it out from Dynamics, from you or whoever. But we can also save it. So by saving it, it's probably best for us to put in a due date, schedule it for the future. Perhaps I want to send it towards the end of next week because I've only just followed up with him today. If I hit save, it'll then sit on the lead record waiting to be sent in a week's time, and also on your own dashboard waiting for you to send it. So again, no opportunity to forget. So back at our lead, you'll see that that email is now sitting there in white, representing the fact that it hasn't yet been sent or it hasn't yet been complete. Exactly the same goes for the appointment functionality. So you can create and schedule appointments straight out of Dynamics as well. One thing I would just like to highlight is if you do, within the attendees field, if you do add in attendees, it's exactly the same as if you were to send an appointment from Outlook. So the recipient or the person you're taking the meeting with will receive that request. So just err on the side of the caution because they will get all the detail within the description box. So if you were planning this meeting, obviously feel free to fill in the time and the date as you would do normally. But you will also notice that you've got these key flags in the top right hand corner to highlight whether this is a demo or not. If this is marked as yes, it automatically rolls up to the lead to represent the fact that the lead has had a demo, and it does also calculate the amount of demos that a lead has. So you do get a nice understanding of exactly how many demos it takes to get that sale closed. Now at the point that the demo is completed, there is this internal feedback box which does what it says on the tin and allows you to provide your own internal feedback that doesn't go back to the client. Once you've provided your internal feedback, you can then mark that appointment as complete, or you can save and close and someone else can complete it for you if you want to. One thing that is particularly useful, I'm just going to remove this person and put myself in here so the meeting request can send. So if I mark this as a demo, I can say who the demo is. Sorry, Lewis, I'm going to pick on you a bit today. And then I save my appointment. At the moment, Lewis doesn't yet know that he is the one providing this demo. So in order to notify him, I can use the email a link button in the ribbon at the top of Dynamics to create an email directly to this appointment, so that Lewis can click on Carlos's name, perhaps see all the detail about that lead, and educate himself a little bit before providing that demo. Well, but in the meantime, I'm just going to delete this appointment. We don't want that in there. I'm back at Carlos. So evidently this activities panel can get quite busy because it can show emails that we've sent from Dynamics, phone calls we've had, appointments we've scheduled, or tasks that we've completed or are scheduled for the future. So at any point you can use the filter in the top right hand corner to drill down on something that you want to look at with a little bit more detail. Let's say I just want to look at the phone calls or the tasks that have happened. I can filter down in such a manner to do that. This is also equally useful when the lead qualifies, becomes an opportunity, and there is a lot more activity involved at that stage, or indeed they become an account and an active customer. That very much gets a bit more clogged up with a lot more activity. The final channel is the notes channel, and really I'd err on the side of caution when using the notes channel because we can't be anywhere near as clever about the notes as we can about the posts. So if you do have notes to make, I would encourage you to use the posts channel within the social pane. What I'd like to do now, if I may, is switch actually now to Outlook to demonstrate to you the exact scenario we've just done, but from within Outlook, because I'm sure a lot of you spend a lot of time within Outlook. So just to replicate that. So forgive me because this is my live mailbox. So if there's anything untoward, I'm the recipient, not the sender. So let's take this email here from Steve Wild as an example. Now let's take this email as an example of a potential new lead, or indeed a potential new opportunity. You will notice now at the top of the ribbon, in the ribbon at the top of Outlook, that you have this blue Dynamics 365 button. When selecting that button, Dynamics goes off and says, okay, Lucy, what do I know about this contact or any of the individuals involved in this email? And it will show you, and it will highlight to you at this point the contact record it has found, or the lead record it has found at that point, which is great. At that point, I can say to Dynamics, I'm happy for you to take a copy of this email and put it next to that lead or that contact in CRM. So simply by hitting the track button in the top right hand corner, it does that. At that point, Dynamics is saying, okay, is there anything else you'd like me to put a copy of this email against outside of Steve's lead record? And I'm going to say, actually, yes, Steve came to me via this company, ACS 365, so I actually want to track it also against that company. Perhaps it's the referrer. And by doing that, you'll notice it brings in all of the overarching important information about that company as well. You'll have noticed, if I just go back a step, you'll have also noticed I can track that email against other accounts, other contacts, indeed against opportunities or other leads should I wish. Now, at that point, it might also be worth noting that, let's say this email has come from a referrer. Steve is the referrer, and he's saying in this email that I've got a new lead for you. And you actually want to not only track this against Steve as a contact at the referrer, but you also want to create the new lead that he's talking about within his email. So to do that, you can simply use the new button at the top of the search bar, click on lead, and the CRM encourages you then to just fill out the simple details about those leads. It's also pulled out as much as possible about that contact or that lead as it can. All you have to do then is simply hit save, and your lead is created within Dynamics. One thing I would encourage you to do, let's make this lead live, is I would encourage you to use this feature at the bottom, the open the record while saving feature, because as soon as you then save that lead, it's going to open up the full version of that lead for you to then perhaps change the status, change the fact that it's qualified or its rating, and take it through the next stage of the business process bar. So one thing I would just then bear in mind is worth doing. Now all of this is all well and good if you know the person that's sending you the email. So if you don't, let's take this email as an example, and you go to track the email, Dynamics will highlight to you that it doesn't have a contact or a lead with that email address. And it will, in bright orange, highlight the fact and encourage you to create that new contact or that new lead at that point. It will do its best to pull out as much as it knows about Jim. So his first name, his last name, and his email address. All I have to do is, well, I can even copy and paste things from the left-hand side into this portion, save, and again, my lead or my contact is created for me. So it really does make life a lot easier when it comes to creating new leads or new contacts, accounts or opportunities. Now this is all well and good for emails that you've received, but what about emails that you are sending? So let's go as if to send a new email to that person that we met on the way into work this morning. Let's take Neil. Neil already exists. So let's do so I've typed in the email address. Again, I hit Dynamics. It's taking a few seconds because I don't think it knows who you are, Miles. It's saying, no, we don't know, so let's create the lead. So I'll do that quickly. Again, pulled in first name, last name. I'll just find the company name. And then I'll save that record. But at that point, as well as being able to create the lead and perhaps also any follow-up activity out the back of this email, I can also track that email and make sure that it's already in Dynamics before I've even sent it. I have then also got the same functionality that we saw within Dynamics itself with the ability to insert templates. So here's a very similar example. I can select my template, I can add it to my email, and it's pulled in all of the areas that it should do. I can tweak that, finish off my email, but importantly, finally, before I send it, I've got this rather Big Brother-esque feature, which is the ability to follow that email. By hitting follow, Dynamics puts a tiny little image at the bottom of this email. That means when Miles opens this email, Dynamics knows that he's opened the email because the image is downloaded and will feed that straight back into CRM. So we've got full feedback as to whether they have actually opened that email or not. So I won't send this, Miles, so you don't have any rubbish emails in your inbox, but that will automatically appear on the right-hand panel when this email is sent. So that's both sending, so for emails that you sent and emails that you have received, but the other benefit of the Dynamics add-in to Outlook is the ability to track appointments against leads or contacts. So a demo being a perfect example. So taking today's meeting as a classic case, I can take my appointment. It might be one I've newly created or indeed one I'm creating at the time. Again, I hit the Dynamics button. It tells me all I know about Christy and Rebecca. It actually doesn't know Rebecca, so I could create her at this point. It knows plenty about Christy. Hit track, do exactly the same thing, and now that appointment is now safely in Dynamics against Christy and Rebecca, and I might just put it against RedCloud as an account or indeed as an opportunity. Brilliant. So all I need to do now is close my appointment or save it and send it, and then that will sit in Dynamics ready for everyone to see. Back at CRM, so that's exactly that same scenario as we've just described, to create and manage new leads straight into Dynamics. Back at CRM, one thing I mentioned briefly earlier, which you'll see on the right-hand side, is this demo section. This will calculate the total number of demos that Carlos has received, the date of his first demo and the date of his last demo. And if indeed we qualify, it will also work out the difference between the time it's taken to provide Carlos with a demo. So that gives you a nice little overview of that. Equally, I can start to tag the company that's referred Carlos and the contact at that company. And the final piece just sits right at the bottom underneath the Details tab, which is where we can start to capture key details as to whether they want to receive our marketing capability, our marketing communications or not. I'm just going to shrink that for the moment. Now, assuming Carlos is happy, he's had his tasks, had a couple of phone calls, even some emails from us and some demos, at this point we've got a couple of different options. Perhaps Carlos comes back and says, actually, no chance whatsoever, I'm not interested in the slightest. You can then disqualify Carlos, and you can just give a brief reason as to why Carlos is no longer interested. Or alternatively, you've got your qualify button. Now, by clicking qualify, Dynamics creates 3 records. Firstly, Carlos as contact. Secondly, the bank, BBVA Bancoma, as the account. And then it creates the opportunity and takes you straight to that opportunity with which to start working on. So the opportunity very much is that particular instance of a sale where you can now start to record the key sales values. So I'm just going to open up the first one on this list to demonstrate. So you'll notice at this point it then takes you to the goal shared stage within the business process bar where different key questions are asked, none of which are required, but they are very much encouraged. Say perhaps what solution that you're offering them, the goals, the contractual sales value, the term, and whether you've got confidence in it and what your confidence is in that potential opportunity. Likewise, whether you've noticed any competitors or not. Some of these fields you'll see is replicated in the top right-hand corner, so the probability and indeed the status and who the owner of this opportunity is. So very, very similar process to the lead itself, but just much more further along the sales journey. Moving on, again, it's pulled across all the key information that it had at lead and pulled it into the opportunity itself, such as the region. I can define the key account and contact, the type of contract that they're looking for, the type of where it came from, pulled through if we didn't know it already, and indeed the currency that this opportunity is in. A note on currency, this is defaulting to dollars, but you can change it to other currencies if you want to. You'll notice any other field with a currency within it will automatically default to dollars. You can then start to pull in some of your key values, the terms, the next steps, some of which are required. The estimated close date is a very, very important field because it populates our pipeline which sits on our dashboard, which we'll come back to in just a moment. In the central panel, any email that has been involved in getting this opportunity to the stage it's at currently is there and has been brought across. Likewise, any posts that got it to where it should be. Referral will come through, number of demos, and you also have a link to the originating lead. So if you did want to go back to see the individual and how it got to this stage, you can do. But you can also start to drill down further and start to apply key stakeholders, whether they're at the organisation AS Bank or not, or indeed perhaps third-party consultants that they might be using. You can simply find the name of the person that is the stakeholder and then define the role that they're playing. So I can see that Mr. Sharma is a stakeholder in this instance. Let's just remove that one for the moment. So it really starts to build up a bigger picture of what's going on. Likewise, you can define who's working on this internally at RedCloud and the role that they're playing. So I'll just show you some examples of the roles that we've got in there. Andrew, perhaps he's a sales professional, whatever it might be. And then finally, we've also got the ability to start to add in our potential competitors should we need to. So that's the bulk of the opportunity. A couple of things that I do really need to highlight is the stages within the business process bar are really quite vital at this point. And if I just flip to the next stage, I'm just using, I'm clicking on the name of the stage to move to a different stage. But if you did physically want to take the opportunity to the next stage, you'd use the next stage button in the bottom right hand corner to do that. However, you will just notice as I flip between these, particularly under the evaluation stage, you've got dates when you completed the proposal and when that got signed off. But one of the most important elements, particularly under the proposal stage, is this field here, the Submit for Approval stage. By choosing Submit for Approval, that automatically creates an email that goes to certain members of the team at RedCloud that says, please can you approve this opportunity. As soon as that's approved, those individuals can then click on the Approved field, which is locked to anyone but them, to evaluate to approve this opportunity, which means you can then take it to the next stage, which is the verbal approval received stage, or the final stage in the sale. As is similar with our lead, it's at this point when you can then mark your opportunity as close as won, i.e. you've received the business. Absolutely wonderful. One thing, when you do go as if to close an opportunity as one, it is encouraging you to put in the revenue that will be generated from the business, which has come through automatically from the estimated revenue, and the close date. Now you can tweak these at this point, so if perhaps the revenue is more than what you expected, or the close date was earlier and you've just got round to closing it now, you can tweak that then. Likewise, the same goes for if you lose an opportunity. It does pull that information through, but you can change it. Now, Miles has just asked a question, which is, can you track emails if an opportunity is not approved? You can, yes, you can track emails against any opportunity, whether it's been approved or not. So if you are still receiving emails from the prospect or from the potential client, you can still use Outlook to track those using the method we just described earlier. Brilliant. So that takes us very much to the end of the sales journey. So assuming we've won this, that will then go into our view of opportunities that we've won or equally lost. Either way, all the way along the journey, this time it's taken to get between each stage will be calculated and will be tracked in this central panel of both the lead and the opportunity. What I'd like to do now, and I'd like, if possible, if you guys are on your machines, for you guys to do the same whilst I'm doing it, is to go back to the dashboard with which we first started. Because for you guys, this will very much light up. So I'm going to drag over my dashboard if you haven't got your own dashboard available, so you can see what this will look like when you start to add your opportunities and your leads. So first up in the top left-hand corner, you have your sales pipeline, which looks at all of your open opportunities via the stage that they're at within the sale. Obviously, the closer towards the bottom of the pipeline, the closer they are to the end of the sale. Now, the bonus of these charts is that not only are they visually quite appealing, but you can also then drill down in on them. So let's take the scenario that it's right at the start of the month, and you want to start working some of these less qualified opportunities through the sales pipeline. You can select that portion of the chart and you can drill down in. So I've just clicked on that, and I want to know perhaps the estimated close date of those opportunities, because I want to work on the ones that are due to be closing sooner. So I can see here, rather embarrassingly, because this is my live dashboard, that some of these should have closed already. So perhaps I might want to focus on those ones that should have closed in July, and I can drill down even further if I want to, and perhaps I want to see the estimated revenue of those opportunities. Again, I can drill down further, so there's some here that are for a bit more than others. At any point, I can use the arrows in the bottom left-hand corner to go either up a stage or use the home arrow, the home icon, sorry, to go back to where I first started. So it really allows you to drill down in, and I actually use this quite commonly when I'm having one-to-ones with my manager, just so he knows what stage I'm at with all my sales. As well as being able to drill down in, you can also use the small square icon in the top right-hand corner to see the opportunities that make up that pipeline. So it pops out into a new window. The pipeline shows on the right-hand side, and the opportunities within them are on the left. So again, you can select the portion of the chart on the right, and it will drill down on the left. So I'm going to take the opposite scenario, where I want to see those that are closer to being closed, because actually it is the end of the month and I might want to close those off as won or lost. Again, I can see those opportunities. I can at a glance scroll between the key information that I want to see, or indeed I can open them up and see them in their entire detail. When working on a list of records, one of my favourite features is in the top right hand corner there is a small set of arrows that allows you to go down to the next record on that list. So particularly when you're working on a small list like we are now of opportunities really good to go, very much close to closing, you can use the arrows, perhaps make a record of the phone call that you've had, chasing up that proposal or seeing where we're at with the stage, and then use the arrows in the top right hand corner to go down to the next one on the list. So I'll just hover over that for a second so you can see. If, like me, you're a keyboard shortcut fan, you can also use the keyboard shortcut Control and right pointing arrow, or Control and full stop, to go to the next one on the list. Brill. So back at our dashboard, next up, one of my key features is this relationship assistant. So this probably touches briefly on what Lewis mentioned earlier, but basically the relationship assistant analyzes every record that you've got something to do with and makes assessments on steps it thinks you should be taking next. So as you can see here, it's recognized a lot that there's some contacts or accounts that I haven't spoken to recently. Equally, this might be opportunities that are due to close soon, and normally we email them every week and we haven't emailed them or had any communication with them, and it will encourage me to have, open that opportunity and communicate with them. Also, it will analyze my emails, so whether I've tracked this email into CRM or not, and in this case I haven't, this is email to me, and it's noticed that there might be an issue with this email. So it's basically highlighting key emails I might want to pick up on. Again, another email that might have an issue or some queries here. So I can pop that open, see that email straight within Dynamics and respond to it here too. Moving on, we've then got our What's New pane, which, as you'll notice, is made up of those automated posts or those manual posts that my colleagues have put on leads or records that they're working on. So here, funnily enough, you can see that I made Miles, so that's automatically on there. Anyone that follows me will see that. Likewise, I made another lead. With these posts, you can hover over them and you can, in a Twitter or Facebook-esque fashion, like them or indeed reply to them if you want to. So it becomes like that bit of a sort of communication stream, and I will find out if we can search within those too. But you can also put in one-off posts that don't relate to anything, whether no lead or opportunity, and you can tag in your colleagues if you want to, just by using the @ symbol, then searching for the record you want to tag in. So I might want to @ my colleague Chris. It'll find Chris as a user. And he'll see that. It'll be on his dashboard and on the dashboard of anyone else that follows me. People can like it, reply to it as you would expect. Brill. So moving on, underneath that we have a couple of other simple charts which I think are just nice to keep an eye on, which will be the same on your dashboard. First up, you've got all of the leads that you're working on via where they're coming from. So it will show you their source in your example. You can pop out, you can drill down in if you want to, in the same way as we did with the pipeline in the top left-hand corner. Then we have our top opportunities. So our opportunities that are open by their value just allows us to focus on the most important ones. And finally, our top customers. So this is where we have our opportunities that have closed as one by the value. So really who I need to be sending bottles of wine to at Christmas or taking out for dinner. Finally, right at the bottom of our dashboard, we have our list of activities. Now this harks back to what we started on right at the start, where these are activities that have either been created by me to remind myself to do it in the future, or indeed created by by someone else or assigned to me. So there are a couple of things I need to really get on and do now, and I can again click on the name of whatever this activity is regarding, and I can see that task sit in the central panel of that lead, account, contact or opportunity. So that really brings us back to where we first started, as I just go back to your dashboard here, which brings all that information just into that home screen. So you shouldn't ever really have to move away from this home screen other than to use perhaps the search bar in the top right hand corner, or if you want to do a more detailed view of leads or accounts or contacts. Now obviously Lewis did ask if there's any way we can bulk bring in leads, accounts and contacts, which I will just look at now. So if that isn't relevant to everyone else, feel free to drop off at this point if you want to. We will also cover the mobile and tablet app and how you access it on your phone as well, so do stay on if you want to have a look at that. Now moving on, so Lewis, you did mention you want to be able to import those leads. There's a couple of ways with which we can bring in multiple records at once. Firstly, and probably the most common way of doing that, is by navigating to the type of record that you want to import and using the import data feature, which is always there in the top command bar. when you import data, it asks you to obviously find the spreadsheet of data that you have. So I should have, let me see if I've got an example here, if I can bring in, bear with me. Let's take this one. Just a word of warning, we do recommend that you use CSV files rather than any other type of file when importing data. When you found the file, you can hit next, and Dynamics imports that file. Then hit next.
Was there just a quick question to see, on that Excel sheet, was there a particular order and number of columns that must exist to upload it correctly?
It's a really good question. So there doesn't have to be a minimum number of columns, because you can import even if you don't have any required field. But we do need to ensure that there isn't any hidden columns or merged columns and things like that, which is why CSV is recommended. One thing I would say is just to make your life easier is make sure that the name of the columns is similar to the name of the field that you're bringing it into in Dynamics, so that it's clear for you when you're mapping each field in your spreadsheet to each column in your spreadsheet to a field in CRM where it should sit. But that should become more obvious in just a second. So when you've imported your spreadsheet, you can then say, I want to do the mapping for myself, or the automatic mapping, which is the most recommended step, really, because it's where Dynamics tries to work out the columns in your spreadsheet via the fields in CRM. Then you tell it what type of record you want to import it against, so lead in this instance. Then hit next again, and it's at this point that you go into the specifics. So the left-hand column is the source fields, the fields from your spreadsheet, and the right-hand column is the Dynamics 365 fields. The top lot of fields are the required fields that you do need to make sure are mapped correctly. So for example, last name, source, where it's come from. So you can grab your columns from the spreadsheet and just make sure that they all map up. You can ignore columns from your spreadsheet, so you don't necessarily have to delete the columns that you're not going to import, and you just choose the ignore feature or not mapped. It will just, when you go and submit all this data, let's say postcode for that one, when you go to import it, it will just say there are some fields that you are ignoring, so that data won't be imported. Then when you've made sure that all the fields matched up, again you hit next. And then this is quite an important step. You just at this point then choose, do you want CRM to allow duplicates? I would suggest you probably don't with this import. So it will look at each record on your spreadsheet and not allow those to be brought in at that point. But also then who the owner of these records should be. Should they belong to you or indeed another colleague? Now, if this spreadsheet that you're using is in a format that you're going to be receiving commonly, I don't know, perhaps it's coming from a lead generation organization or Credit Save for Experian or something like that, you can then save having to do all the mapping work that you've just done in the previous step. You can save this as an option. Let's call this one. And then you can use that data map in the previous step again, and it'll do all that hard work for you. Then at that point you hit submit, and obviously all that data will be brought in. I'm not going to do that in this instance, but that is the final step. One thing I would just like to highlight is you can then see, and it will automatically take you to the progress of your data import, which I've just manually got to by going to the settings menu, going to data management and clicking on imports. This will show you the imports that you have you've started. So you can see that I have submitted this one, but I cancelled it at that point. It will show you the successes, any partial failures or any errors. So if indeed you do find that when you import some of these records and they errored, you can see why. So let's just have a look at all imports. There were some errors on this one. I don't anticipate when you're importing leads that you will experience many errors, but it's just worth knowing where to correct those if you have any. So I've opened up the import. I can click on the failures on the left-hand side, and I can see it's because they tried to import these leads against a country that didn't exist. So the Samoa Islands, Philippines, UAE. So perhaps I just need to tweak the name of those countries in my spreadsheet. It's probably United Arab Emirates, if you see what I mean. You can export that list of records as well. There'll be a little button in the ribbon here that says export the errors, and then import just the records that you had an error with. Okay. So that's the sort of most traditional way of importing those leads. The other way, which is slightly simpler and might be a way that you get on with more effectively, is from within a view, you've got the button in the ribbon at the top called Export to Excel. Using the drop down next to that option, the first option is to export into Excel Online, which basically takes a copy of everything that you're looking at. In fact, I'm going to cancel that and get a smaller view because there's 5,000 leads in this view. Let's just take this one. So it basically takes all the leads in the view that you're looking at with all the columns that you're looking at and puts it into an editable Excel document through CRM, which means you can make lots of edits to all of these leads at once if you want to. So it might be that you want to change, the date or the status or the names. You can edit them in bulk and add in bulk. So in a very similar way to using Excel normally, you can simply add in new records here if you want to at the bottom of the list, or even copy and paste in if you want to. Then
that's very useful.
Yeah, I think that's probably my preferred way. It is basically doing a normal import, and it will give you the status. So if you are still trying to, you've got a column for country in here and the country doesn't exist, it will show you the errors on that in the import in the same way we just looked at.
Yeah. I'm guessing we can pull data this way when and include, for example, a salesperson, and if that person leaves the company, we can use this to reassign the leads and then just bulk re-upload.
Absolutely. Yeah, or there is a feature where you can literally take everything that belongs to a salesperson and assign everything they own to someone else. So we could do that in that instance too. Now, at the point when you're finished doing your bulk editing, you've got two options. You can either return to Dynamics, particularly useful if you've made a bit of a mistake and you've copied and pasted the wrong columns into the wrong fields or something, and that will ignore all the changes that you've made, or you can save changes to Dynamics and it will import those changes. So obviously I'm just going to return to Dynamics, but you guys would probably want to save. And then after about 5 minutes, all of those changes, those new records that you've created, will be brought in. Let's just go back to my list of leads. The final thing that is worth bearing in mind, particularly from a marketing perspective, is that you can make changes to records in bulk as well if you want to. So let's filter. We're in customer leads this financial quarter. Let's filter that by those in tier 1, for example. And let's say we've spoken to all of these, we've emailed them, sent them a nice looking email, had a demo with them, and we want to change them all to tier 2. Just as an example, you can use the checkbox in the top left-hand corner and then hit the edit button in the command bar at the top. And then you can make bulk edits to all of those records you've selected by using this slightly, this version of the form. So you could change the tier if you wanted to. Click change and it'll change all those records. So multiple ways to do very similar things, but whatever is easiest for you. The final thing I want to show you when it comes to looking at large amounts of records, I mentioned it briefly earlier, is how you would create your own views of records if you wanted to. So we'll take leads as an example, but there's two ways with which you can create your own views. If I use the drop down next to the view selector in the ribbon at the top and go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see I can create a personal view. Or alternatively, I can use the filter in the top right hand corner, which is known as the advanced find. And again, the advanced find does what it says on the tin and allows you to create these really drilled down views of the records within Dynamics. Very much, if those of you are familiar with SQL, very similar to that. So I can click on New to create a new view. Now let's take the scenario that I'm going into London and I want to see all the leads that people are working on in London to see if it's worth me having a conversation with them when I'm there. So first up, I choose which record I'm looking for. I want to look for leads. I can then use a view that already exists in order to help me filter down or get started. And one of the benefits of doing that is it brings all the columns that are in that view. So I love the columns that are in this view in the background because it's very detailed. So I'm going to use that as my template. So RedCloud customer leads in this financial quarter. So it also brings in the query that is used to populate that. And actually, I don't necessarily want all of that, so I can ungroup them, I can delete those rows, or I can keep that there if I want to. So this is currently showing me all leads, all partner leads, this financial period that aren't disqualified. That's fine, apart from the only thing I want to change is I want it to be a customer lead. So I'm going to drill down in and change that, remove partner, put in customer. I might drill in even further. For example, I want their country to equal United Kingdom. And perhaps I also want their city to equal London. Right, so I could group those as and if I wanted to, but by default they're anding everything. So they're a customer, customer lead created this fiscal period that are not disqualified in the UK and in London. And at any point I can use my results button to preview the kind of results that's going to give me. So drilled down that there aren't any. So I can go back to my advanced find. I might remove some of this query if I want to. Let's take these out. See if that's got any. Go back to my results. No, still none. Anyhow, assuming I'm happy with my query, at this point I can hit Save As, give it a name. Change the name that I've already got. Save that, and I can now happily close out of my view, waiting, ready, and it'll be ready for me at the bottom of the list of views. I can also, if I'm feeling generous, choose to share this view with other people. So again, top right hand corner, using the advanced find, I can select, wait for the advanced find to load, and at the top of the advanced find you'll notice there's a button called Saved Views, which takes me to a complete list of all the views I've made for leads. I can then hit Save Views again and click on the Share button, and at that point I just choose the users of CRM that I want to share this view with. So completely, if you're feeling very generous, you can do that. The final thing with views is the ability to edit the columns available in that view if you want to see more data at a glance. So by hitting Edit Columns, you can find those columns, move them around, change the width, and even change how the view is sorted. So at the moment this is sorted by name, but it might actually be more appropriate to sort it by when it was created on. So you can use these buttons at that point to save that configuration. And if you've shared your view with someone already, the changes that you make to that view will be shared with them too. So that's what a lot of the guys in the financial side of the business have been doing over the past few months. Brilliant. So last but by no means least, how do we access Dynamics 365 through the mobile and tablet app? Well, all of you will have this cog in the top right hand corner, which you can navigate down to Apps for Dynamics 365. And right at the top of the window that is shown is the ability to send yourself a little email with a link to the App Store or the Google Play Store, whatever is most relevant for your device, to download the correct app for Dynamics. So I'd encourage you to do that. The first step when configuring the app is to put in the URL for CRM itself, which is the one that I shared with you right at the start of the session and is highlighted at the top there, which is the redcloud.technology.crm4.dynamics.com. It will then ask you to sign in with your username and your password, so hopefully you should be au fait with what those are. And then the layout of the app is very similar to the layout of CRM through the web browser, where it has its search bar in the top right-hand corner and its dashboards that are its home screen. So I very much encourage you to do that and use that particularly for when you're on the road. Brilliant. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I am available for the next sort of few minutes if you do have any questions, or I'll make sure that you have my contact details should you wish to follow up after the session.
Thank you, Lucy. Did you say you were putting this the tape version of this up on YouTube?
Absolutely. I'll get that uploaded in the next few minutes. It might take a little bit of time, and then I'll share it with you, Neil, for you to communicate if that's possible.
There's a number of people who didn't actually make the call, unfortunately, so I think we'll probably send them this, and so they can have a look at it in their own time.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you very much, guys. Good to meet you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.